Hey guys, today is Friday, May 22nd, 2020, and the start of your Memorial Day weekend. Alright guys, so today is the third and final day on our discussion of the moon. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. So first off, you want to read through the slides. I'm going to kind of go through them a little bit with you in this PowerPoint presentation, and then you guys are going to complete a Google Slides activity about the phases of the moon, which you learned yesterday, and how it relates to the tides and a little bit of oceanography. And then, of course, no homework. Just enjoy your long 3-day weekend, and then I'll see you guys back in class on Tuesday. Okay, so a little bit about the moon and the tides. They're obviously linked together. Tides, you guys got a little introduction to. You might remember back in oceanography, we watched a little Edpuzzle, and you hopefully saw that the moon tugs on the Earth's oceans along with the sun, and it creates that daily rise and fall with the ocean water. The moon does have the stronger pull of gravity, even though the sun is bigger, just because of its proximity. It's just a whole lot closer. Okay, so when you're looking at this image here, you can see we have 2 high tides and 2 low tides every single day. So basically, when our part of the Earth, so the closest part from here to the ocean would be Jersey. So when New Jersey is facing the moon, like geometrically in outer space, not like what you see in the nighttime sky, we would have high tide, okay? And then we would swivel on our axis, and 6 hours later, we would be at like a 90-degree angle with the moon. So we would have low tide, okay? And then 6 more hours pass, and we're directly opposite of the moon, when we would have another low tide, or high tide, I'm saying it backwards. And then when we spin one more time, another 6 hours, then we would have low tide again. So we kind of go back and forth every 6 hours, and it's really based on the geometry, the same kind of geometry that you were looking at yesterday with the phases of the moon. Okay. Now, we have our normal high and low tide every day, but we also have a long-term tidal pattern, and they're called spring tides and neap tides. And this pattern is a little more subtle, okay? You're going to see a graph of it in the activity today. And this is based on the phases, or the geometry between the sun, the earth, and the moon. So this is where the sun kind of kicks in to this whole tides thing, okay? And you can see in this picture here, as I look over at the screen, this is our spring tide, okay? And spring tides occur, if you look at the lineup, during new moon and full moon. So when the sun, earth, and moon are lined up together, basically they're pulling on the ocean in the same direction, so you get an enlarged force of gravity, because you're kind of adding the gravitational pulls together. And that means like your high tides during a spring tide or during a full moon are higher than normal, and your low tides are lower than normal. So you get these really extreme changes in the ocean level, which you can see on a graph during spring tide. Now, its counterpart, the neap tide, occurs during the quarter phases, so first quarter and third quarter, okay? And this is where there's not much of a tide at all, okay? And that's because the sun and the moon are tugging on the ocean in opposite directions, so they essentially cancel each other out. It's kind of like adding a positive to a negative number. So your high tides, not very high, your low tides, not very low, okay? And it ends up being just a very small, subtle change in the water level on those particular days, okay? And again, that's all about the phases, the pull of the sun and the moon. So let me just show you guys real quick the graph, just so I can explain a few things that you're going to be taking a look at. So background information, make sure you read that, okay? And then you have the data. I have done the graph for you, okay? I've plotted all the ocean data. This is just from Ocean Buoys, okay? You can see this is from Humboldt Bay, California, and it tells you the date and the height of the ocean at that particular time, okay? And I've graphed it. You can see it on this slide, okay? And you can see that, again, this isn't just the high and low tides every day. This is a course of, a little over a month, so from April 1st to May 8th, okay? And you'll see that the high tides are up here, okay? and then the low tides are the second data point down at the bottom. And essentially, if you look at this, the high tides get a little higher until they reach their maximum, and then they get lower. Then they get higher again, and then they get lower. They kind of make, if you kind of look at this, I think it kind of is like a little, almost like an hourglass shape. Okay? And that, again, is because of the spring tides and the neap tides. So remember, during full moon and new moon, that's where you're going to have the biggest gap between high and low tide. So that's where high tide is at its highest point, low tide is at its lowest point, so the numbers are going to be really far apart. During a quarter phase, during neap tide, that difference between high and low tide is much, much smaller, okay, because they're pulling in opposite directions. So that's what you're going to look for on the graph. And then you're going to take these moons, essentially, and you guys have done this on graphs before, and you're going to place them where they belong, okay? I'm not obviously putting them in the right place for you, but you guys will have to look at the pattern, and then you need to determine what date or dates-ish, because obviously the moon is pretty big, is full moon, new moon, and these quarter phases that you see in the presentation here, okay? And once you figure that out, again, use the notes, use the presentation that I've given you, look things up online if you need help. You can always ask me, of course. And then there's just a couple of conclusion questions. There's only 5. It's not a whole lot for you guys to do. And then you'll turn that in, and then you're all done for the weekend. And then you have your nice 3-day weekend for Memorial Day. So just like usual, don't forget, if you have any questions, please let me know. Tomorrow's Friday, so that means office hours are from 10 to 11. So if you're stuck, come on into office hours and I can explain things there. Or just shoot me an email, send me a comment in Google Classroom. If you guys don't already know, remember the last day of regular class is June 3rd. That's the last day of graded work. So we don't have a lot of time left, especially after Memorial Day weekend is over. So those of you, if you're missing any assignments or anything like that, start working on them, start getting everything together. I'm going to grade this week's assignments today and tomorrow. So you'll be seeing this week's grades go up pretty soon. Just make sure you're staying on top of things because we're getting really close to the end of the marking period, okay? The other thing that I'm announcing to you is that we are not having a test, so to speak, for astronomy. Instead, you are going to do a little project. It's still going to have you show me what you've learned in astronomy. You're going to still use your resources. More to come on that soon. You'll have a couple of days to work on it, that kind of thing. But instead of taking a test, we're going to do a little project, and that'll be kind of the last couple of days of school year. Okay? All right, guys. Well, I hope you have a great Memorial Day weekend. Relax, enjoy, and I will see you back here on Tuesday.